Welcome to IT Newbies, the podcast where we dive into the world of technology with experts from all walks of life. I'm Brent Ingram, and in each episode, we'll be talking to IT professionals about their career journeys, from their early days as newbies to the heights of success they've achieved. And don't worry if you're new to IT, because we'll also be breaking down complex tech topics into beginner-friendly discussions. So whether you're just starting out in the field or looking to level up your skills, join us on IT Newbies as we explore the exciting world of technology together. Subscribe now and never miss an episode. All right, welcome to IT Newbies. Today we have my friend Jose Adame on. Jose, thanks for
Hey,
joining.
Brent. Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Hi, how are you doing today?
Doing good, man.
Good,
Enjoying
good.
Juneteenth, having the day off.
Oh yeah, happy Juneteenth.
Yes.
All right, so go ahead, let me know what is your current role and what does it entail?
So my current role is I work for Proofpoint, and I am a professional service engineer. Basically, my role entails in managing the front end environment for our archive and professional services archive team, maintaining that Windows front end environment, as well as helping with the backend environment and automation, and also doing automation in the front end environment.
Okay, awesome. All right, so basically you help with just making sure that both mainly the front end, but also some of the back end, that those processes are running smoothly and are automated so that it's not just a big manual process all the time, right?
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
we basically allow basically making sure that anything from updates to the hardware itself that that those servers are on, making sure all that is in working order, and
Mhm.
then any extra time, that's where we spend automating and really getting into that.
Awesome. Okay, so that's what you do now, but at one point you were just starting in IT. Did you have a career in IT, or was there something that you were learning before you got into IT?
So the way I got into IT, it's actually I would describe it as the most unorthodox way that I
Yeah.
got into IT. So my first IT job came from actually one of my really good friends, who I'm still best
Mhm.
friends to with this day.
Mhm.
And he knew that I was always interested in computers. Back in the '90s or early 2000s, actually, my parents got me my first computer, and I
Mhm.
would break it all the time. I got
Yeah.
very comfortable with reinstalling Windows XP. And having to, back in the day, there was no drivers baked in, so you had to make sure you had them pre-downloaded, and stick
Mhm.
the CD in the PC and get them installed that way. And so, yeah, it was just basically they needed somebody part-time to come in, and at that point it was Windows 7, and just install
Yeah.
Windows 7 on the new machines that they were receiving, as well as installing Windows Server and just kind of doing pre-configurations for the workstations and servers that we would then go on site and deploy for our clients.
That's awesome. Um, what task or project have you worked on? Are you most proud of?
Um, Honestly, I would say it would be my biggest email migration from on-site Exchange servers to um, Office 365 and Microsoft Online.
Yeah.
I with the help of one of my other teammates, we were able to help and migrate UTLA, which is the uh, teachers union here for the Los Angeles County, and we were able
Mhm.
to set it up and being able to migrate them in a way where it was seamless to an extent to the end user.
Yeah.
Not that there weren't any hiccups. Every project is going to have hiccups,
Yep. Yep.
but it was because the amount of prep work that was done before him, and how that made the process have less hiccups and
Mm,
testing. And the reason I loved working in the project was because it helped me learn a lot more on how to manage a project that big.
yeah.
We're talking about probably over or close to 1,000 mailboxes, which
Oh
at the end of the
wow.
day is
Yeah.
never, there are bigger and, environments out there or
Mhm.
companies that have, thousands or millions of users and mailboxes. But,
Yeah.
working in something at that scale kind of prepares you to work at a bigger scale, because at that point
Yep.
you're having to automate.
Yep. And then about how many years into IT were you when you worked on that project?
So that project would have been, doing quick math in my head, would have been about 6 years into it, 7 years into
Yeah.
it.
Okay. So you weren't, green, but this was still like a pretty big
Yeah,
thing.
it was. And here's the thing I always tell people: you're gonna have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable to an extent.
Mm-hmm.
It's yes, I wasn't necessarily green, or a newbie in it, but it was still doing a lot of things that at that point I hadn't really done at a
Yeah.
large scale. And it was really, that's the reason that became my favorite project, is all the, it wasn't something that maybe taught me a specific, technology skill, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
But it taught me to look at things differently.
Yeah.
Um, in a good way. Not saying that,
Yeah.
when it was smaller, you're not looking at things in that way, but it's just the scope of the project forces those changes, and kind of
Hmm.
learning that difference is why that project became my favorite.
Oh yeah. Well, that's really cool because yeah, just getting to that point of okay, this is bigger than something I've done before. There are repercussions. I'm sure that's you also have to with that amount of people or well really any kind of project where you are migrating x amount of people from on-prem to cloud. There's a lot of just soft skill communications that you need to have with people and to have buy-in, um, because people will go crazy if they don't have access to their email.
Yep,
That's like
exactly.
the lifeblood of a business. um, but yeah, and that's huge that you were able to pull it off with your team with
Yeah,
very little hiccups. And that's so true, just about planning, having a good plan in place. No plan is perfect, you know
yeah,
but also think about if things go wrong, okay, this is how we can remedy it and have a plan in place.
exactly.
And yeah, that makes a huge difference. uh, can you tell me about a time where you made a big mistake, and what did you learn from it?
I will tell you the time that I made my first major mistake, the one that I consider my first major mistake. I was working in my first IT job. So I had been there
Mhm.
probably already about, I want to say about 8 months. So I
Yeah.
went from just doing Windows installation and basic OS installations to, at
Uh,
8 months, I was already working their help desk at a level 2,
yeah.
as well as, going, I got promoted to basically being one of the main on-site guys where we would go and do the actual installations.
Nice.
This project, basically what happened was we, I went to go upgrade to an office. We were going to upgrade their software and replace all their computers, replace the server. And I never looked at the uptime that the server had.
Yeah.
So when I reboot it, it just never came back up. And I hadn't copied
Oh.
data over. I hadn't done anything with it. It's just dead.
Oh.
Which at that point, being so new, not really having that happen before, and not really knowing to an extent how to resolve the issue, because we
Mhm.
needed the data that was on that server. Um, that was, a brown pants moment for a couple of, for a good 30 minutes there, until I was able to talk to one of our escalation guys, and he was able to walk me through what we needed to do to extract the data, which was, take the hard drives out, pop them in the new server, and then pull the data. which again, at that point, I didn't know that. I knew that I could take a hard drive out from one way to the other,
Yeah.
but this was the first time that that had happened to me with a RAID array, which,
Yeah.
then just
Oh, okay.
complicates it more, because you have to import the array without overwriting it. And again,
Hmm.
being so fresh and new, it was scary for a moment.
Yeah. Yeah. That's scary.
But yeah, I mean, and I've continued to make mistakes. I would say the
Hmm.
next biggest, the next biggest one too, that would be rebooting a RDP cluster, and
Hmm.
yeah, rebooting the whole cluster instead of just one individual
Just,
node.
oh,
So
oh.
that was a fun 45 minutes till everything came back up.
Dang, how many nodes were there in that RDP cluster?
It was 10 nodes,
Uh-huh.
and they were servicing about 1,500 um, people that connected to it.
Oh, oh,
So
yeah,
yeah, I mean,
yeah,
you
that's rough.
every one of us is going to make those mistakes.
Hmm. Yep.
The what we want to do in those cases is admit it.
Hmm.
Just go to your admitting it and saying exactly what you did. To me, just shows that you're not afraid to make mistakes. It's something
Hmm.
that for whatever reason, and in our work culture, everybody doesn't want to admit to their mistakes, or admit when they've messed up.
Yeah,
But in IT, I feel like we can't have that. We
yeah,
have to be able to admit where we screwed up. And the reason for that is so that we can learn from them. Because if we refuse ourselves to even admit that we made a mistake,
hmm,
we won't learn from it. We won't,
yep,
get better at, maybe planning what we need to check beforehand before this problem happens, to be able to remediate it quicker. um, you
yep.
know or then the other flip side to that is, if you're working within a team and you don't want to admit exactly what you did wrong, it's just going to
Hmm.
waste more resources in trying to investigate different things that, if you had
Yes.
been honest, we wouldn't even look at, because we knew that they weren't even related. So it's important to admit when we make those mistakes. We're all going to make them. You could
Hmm.
be 30 years in IT, or a brand new newbie, and sometimes both of them will make the same easy mistake.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. And also with admitting what mistake you made early on, it helps to prevent the problem from getting even bigger. Someone who actually has knowledge is able to like mitigate the damage that's done. But the longer you wait, the more opportunities for that to just escalate and
Yeah,
cascade the issue. Um, but yeah, that's a really good point. And like you're saying, like there's always going to be uncertainty. I used to, or I was once taught like a core value of embrace uncertainty, and it relates really well to IT because, well, one, like we don't know everything. There's always something new to learn, and you're never, and there's plenty of times where you won't be certain on if something will work, but you got to try it, and hope that it works. And if that doesn't, okay, you go down the line until you find a solution.
yeah,
But yeah, there's so many things that don't necessarily have a plain answer, or a plain solution.
yeah. And again, we live in a field where it's always changing. You're gonna have
Yes.
you're gonna have new error codes that you've never seen before. You're gonna have, the more and more IT, if we look at it nowadays from when it was 10, 15, 20 years ago,
Mhm.
it's gotten more complex. It hasn't
Yeah.
gotten less.
Yep.
It's the opposite, where there's so many new things coming out. There's so many
Mhm.
new technologies coming out. Technology is being applied into a lot of different areas that they might have not been before. And
Yes.
it's like you said, it's you just have to embrace that uncertainty. And I think part of that's where the planning comes along, and being able to like
Mhm.
realize, okay, I'm going to do this, but also then just taking that extra step to like, okay, if this doesn't work, what can I do to reverse it? Or if this breaks something, what
Yeah.
can I do to bring it back? Something as simple as, for example, maybe just taking the snapshot of the VM before you do it. That way, if you screw it up, just
Yep.
revert it, and no harm, no foul. But again, it's these things that you learn through making the mistakes, so that then in the future
Yes.
you know how not to make them.
Yes. Yes. 100%. Because there's been times where, like back when I was doing help desk, someone would, ask for help putting in a ticket for something, and I hop on their computer remotely. It takes me 2 seconds to fix the issue. They think you're just amazing and the super smart person, and I'm like, no, I've done this. I've made this mistake before myself, and it took me, a long time to figure it out. But now that you've seen it, yeah, it takes me 2 seconds to fix it now. But that just comes from experience of making mistakes, and finding out the answer. Um, something that you brought up on our chat, before I hit record, was that you are a DACA recipient. How has that, um, I guess, affected or like intertwined your career in IT?
I'm gonna be honest. If it wasn't for DACA, I wouldn't be in IT.
Hmm.
I graduated in actually, before we go down that route, let's I want to take the time and just kind of explain a little bit what DACA is, in case some of
Yeah.
your listeners aren't aware fully with it. DACA stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. So this was a law that was passed in 2012 by, or not a law, I'm sorry, it was a um, I'm blanking on the name, but basically it was an order that President Obama passed, where
Hmm.
basically the immigration services, our immigration department, they defer your action for deportation. So
Hmm.
we check in with immigration services. It's something that you renew. It's only
Hmm.
valid for 2 years. And the only thing that DACA actually gives you, besides, they're deferring your deportation, not that you were in list to get deported, you're
Yeah.
just willingly going to them and basically saying, "Hey, I'm here. This is where I live. This is, this is where I work." And
Yeah.
you go through an extensive background check. Every 2 years, I
Mm.
have my fingerprints taken. They get ran through, all the databases. I have my picture taken. I
Yeah.
have to go into an immigration office every 2 years for this, as well as, pay for the fee that the government charges for this. Um, and that's what the only thing DACA gives you. Now, where it comes to play into why it's the only reason that I would be in IT for, it's because I graduated in 2010.
Mhm.
So this was before DACA. At the time, I knew that I was, an illegal immigrant here in the United States,
Mhm.
um, and um, you know, I didn't have a future. I It's part of the reason why, to be honest, I didn't go to college. I, you know, there was no possible way for me, or no benefit for me, to go to college, because nowhere that would take that sort of college degree for work would take someone that doesn't have a social security number, that doesn't
Yeah.
have the permissions, or for them to be able to work here in the United States. So when this law passed in 2012, it opened the doors for me
Mm.
in a lot of different ways. That was how I was able to get my first IT job, where
Wow.
I was working there with my buddy. And once I started working it, I always liked computers,
Yeah.
um, but I just made it my career because I enjoyed it.
Mhm.
For
Mhm.
me, it wasn't work. Previously to that, the only work places that I had worked at was um, food service jobs and
Mhm.
factory jobs, because they're the two only ones that will take someone in my position.
Yeah.
um, so going now to that, that's when I decided to make it my career. And it was partly because of something my dad always told me. He's a construction worker. He's That's all he's done since we've lived here in the United States since he's been
Mhm.
here since probably around the late 90s.
Mhm.
um, me and my mom, my sister, we didn't move here into 2001. So he always told me, because he worked construction, he's like, I don't want you to work hard with your body. because I could see him. He now has knee problems because he was always on his,
Mm.
on his knees. He has, shoulder problems because, of how much he's worked with his body,
Yeah.
and where he's, getting older now. That's what he always told me, to work with my brain. And
Yeah.
that was part of the other big reason why, that's the route I went to when DACA became available to us. And then, it opened up those doors for us.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that's amazing that it was able to just provide you with opportunities to, um, I mean, better yourself, but also to just be a huge part of helping businesses to run better. And, DACA recipients also pay taxes
Yep.
like everyone else,
Yeah.
and go through, yeah, it sounds like that's a pretty extensive background check, every 2 years.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that's a lot.
Yeah. And it opened not only the doors, for people like me who are already out of high school, but the
Mhm.
biggest ones that I want to say who it opened the doors to are the people who are still in their early stages of, like, high school, middle
Mm.
school, who were able to get DACA.
Mhm.
Because for them now it opened something that to me there was no point in doing.
Mm.
There's yes, there's no need to go to college to work in IT. I didn't,
Yeah.
and we're here now, and
Mhm.
but there are certain things that, certain fields that might be do require that for. And part of that, a lot of DACA recipients are nurses. A lot of DACA recipients
Yeah.
worked through COVID in those, high risk jobs,
Yeah.
and did it willingly. And they were only able to be in those positions because they had DACA early on, where they were able to try and find a career for them. It wasn't like when I didn't, I was, yes, to an extent you could say, oh, well, you were only 2 years out of high school at that point. But two
Yeah.
years out of high school, when you've already been working, like, you have
Yeah.
bills, you got rent, like, it's different versus, like, if you were, let's say you were a freshman in high school and you were able to
Mhm.
even take advantage of certain other things. That personally, for example, like, I didn't take advantage of it. I ended up not even taking my SAT or any of the college stuff.
Mm.
My counselor made me, just like any high school, they force everybody to apply for a couple of colleges, and I got
Yeah.
accepted to the colleges, but I declined going because, number one, I wasn't going to have the money because I didn't qualify for any grants or any sort of financial
Mm.
aid.
Yeah.
Um, that's something that California later on passed, actually, a law here. And then also, number two, again, there's no need for me because I couldn't work in those branches. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
again, it benefits a lot of people, and it benefits, like you said, other businesses and even the U.S. government with the amount of, there's about, I want to say, 900,000 DACA recipients. And like you
Wow.
said, we pay into taxes, we pay into Social Security, which
Yeah.
we don't qualify for.
Yeah.
So, we're
Oh, wow.
paying all this money, and to the U.S. government, and a lot of us will say, we're gladly pay this. We are
Mhm.
completely okay with paying into, paying our taxes. All the only thing that we really ask for is just give us the opportunity to work. Like, give us the opportunity
Yeah.
to better not only ourselves, our families, but also even,
Mhm.
like you said, like, businesses, and being able, there's,
Yeah.
DACA recipients who have started businesses who are doing great now, who maybe,
Mhm.
because of COVID advance or were being able to be utilized, like, having that. And then, if you're just shutting down that big of a portion of people who live within your country, it's only
Mhm.
going to harm at the end of the day.
Oh, man. Wow. Yeah, that's a lot to think about. Thank you for sharing. I do want to just switch gears a little bit. This could piggyback off of it. It might not. But what's some advice that you would give your younger self in regards to IT?
Honestly, I would say start learning earlier. You
Mm.
don't need uh, you don't need to even start on the deep end of things. Honestly, I would tell myself, learn how to Google now,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Learn how to Google search. But also, learn how to read, some sort of process or documentation, and
Mm.
then be able to in a way follow it, um, even if things maybe not look exactly the same, or the verbiage, in the software that you're doing looks a little different, or like the GUI is completely different, and trying to figure it out. I think
Yeah.
part of that is going to what we were talking earlier about being uncomfortable with being uncomfortable, or sorry, being
Yeah.
comfortable with being
That's-
uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that's something that I would tell my younger self. And then the other one, like I said, you don't need college for IT. You don't
Yeah.
you don't have to go to college for IT. But again, you do need to spend kind of the same study time as if you were going to college, but just
Yep.
dedicate that to IT. And it doesn't mean that you have to do like 40 hours a week of training, but like if you do maybe an hour and a half a day, for a year, bam, now
Hmm.
you have your base, foundation built to where you can start your first IT job. And then the other thing that I would tell myself also, which I still currently do, is don't stop learning. Do not stop researching, what's new
Hmm.
technologies are coming up. um, you know uh, Start creating your home lab environment where you can test things, where you can play around, where you can break things. I mean,
Yeah.
that to me has been where I've learned the most. It's playing with my home lab, and it doesn't need to be anything fancy. It doesn't have to be a brand new server. It doesn't even need to be a server at all. It could just be, honestly, a lot of what my gear in my lab is, I go on eBay and buy, they have right now, for example, like, small form factor computers. I bought
Yeah.
3 of them. They're about 120 a pop. They're not the latest. I think it has like an
Yeah.
i5 6600, 8 gigs of RAM. But again, that just gives you enough basis to start. You can throw Windows
Yes.
Server on it. You can, right? I'm using it for learning Docker and clustering Docker and high availability with Kubernetes as well.
Yeah.
But again, it's having just something that you can and work on and learn. And don't be afraid to just, I'll set up things that I'm never going to use just to learn how to set them up. And
Hmm.
then after I'm like, okay, I got my note, and I'll keep my notes. And that would be the other one, is always keep detailed notes of the projects that you do at home,
Yeah.
because they have come in to save me. A lot of the scripts that I would write to play
Oh
around and
wow.
test things that in my home lab, they've come back to help me. And yeah, I mean, if I could tell myself all those things at like maybe like I want to say like right around 12, 13, I think that would have been even 14. Um, I think that would have been perfect, and it would have kind of helped me get to where I am now sooner.
Oh wow, that's awesome. You mentioned, I guess a couple things. You mentioned a Kubernetes cluster. Just from a very very high level, what is Kubernetes or slash containers?
So containers, the way we can think about them is um, virtualized applications that run independently of your operating system.
Hmm.
So, typically the way where, or I would say, and this is still the way most things are done, but I will call it the old school way of doing it.
Yeah.
Um, it was, you would have one server per appliance, whether that was a virtual server, whether that was or a physical server.
Hmm.
There were times where, like, yeah, you could have different applications that you could install, on the same server, but you would run into issues because maybe, for example, and this is a Windows example, so it's kind of a little bit of a bad one, but this does happen in Linux, which is where Docker comes in.
Hmm.
um, there are times where two applications cannot be on the same server because they conflict. So it's like, well,
Hmm.
what do you do at that point? What do you do then? Well, the current way of doing things is, okay, well, you just virtualize the servers, and that's how you do it. And that is a great way to do it. The only
Hmm.
downside of doing it that way is you are then limited to, number one, high availability. So if you need to expand, you're going to have to manually go in. You have to deploy a new VM. You have to get the software
Hmm.
installed. And again, it doesn't have to be manual. You could have automation scripts that are, different things like Puppet or Ansible that can help you streamline that to, deploy the new virtual machine.
Yeah.
The way Docker, and why a lot of people and a lot of things are moving that way, it's number one, is just lighter on resources. So you don't have to worry about running the operating system and all the resources that takes, and then multiply that by however many virtual machines you need to, expand your application or serve it in high availability. Versus now a container, you don't have to worry about that. You can even have the container itself, if you're using Kubernetes or Docker, to where you can tell it, hey, if you start seeing that, we're getting bogged down, expand, deploy more containers
Yeah.
um, that then you can then utilize to help spread that bandwidth out, over the different servers. Now, ideally, you would want to have the part of a cluster, you want at least three. So that way, the other benefit of containers is in a clustering is that if one node goes down, your containers will be respin back up on the rest of them, and you might notice a little bit of a drop,
Yeah.
but it will to an extent self heal and deploy on its own.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you for breaking that down. I think that'll really help people who are interested in Kubernetes or have heard the word Docker and containers,
Yeah.
thrown around
Yeah.
to know
And
what's out there or understand
yeah,
it a
and
bit
I will
better.
say, a lot of the Docker documentation does, to an extent, make it seem sometimes a little bit more complicated than it is.
Yeah.
Um, but it's again, it's one of those things where you just kind of have to sit down and play with it, and that's how you're going to learn it. That's how you're going to learn it. You have to
Mm-hmm.
play with it, and again, that's how you sharpen your IT skills.
Yep, that's so true. Like just like what you were saying, just about your home lab. A lot of it is you learn by doing it, by setting up a lab and just testing it out, see what's out there, and do it in a low stakes environment.
Exactly.
Again, buy a couple, cheap computers, $120 a pop, and yeah, practice on that.
Yeah.
And it's possible. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing too, it's like also don't one of the things that I always tell people, I'm like, a lot of the enterprise grade software that you're going to use for
Mhm.
working, for example, like in an actual corporation, um, a lot of those tools do offer a free community edition. So
Yeah.
stuff like, for example, ESXi, which is vCenter. Well,
Mhm.
not vCenter because that's you have to pay for that. For vSphere, there is a
Yeah.
free edition. Everybody can install it, run it on a server, and play around with that. Play around with making virtual machines using that. And again, it's completely free. You just have to have
Hmm.
hardware to install it on. And there's a lot of great YouTube videos that go over a lot of cool things within EXXI that you can learn and use your free version for.
Yeah.
Veeam, which is one of the top backups that corporations use to back up ESXi
Hmm.
hosts. Again, has a free community edition. You can learn how to configure a backup. You can learn how the different retention policies work and deduplication and do all that stuff. And again, free community edition.
Yeah.
Now, the only caveat on that is Veeam community only works if you do have the paid version of EXXi. Only reason for that
Mm.
is EXXi does block the API usage, which is understandable. I can definitely see why, because then they don't want corporations to then utilize the free version.
Yeah.
But it does add a little bit of caveat. But there are places where you can get the licenses for super cheap.
Yeah.
One of the things that I would recommend to anybody who's trying to learn vSphere or vCenter and kind of that you know technology stack, if you, what I would call it, would be to get vmug. I believe it's only about $200 a year, but you get basically a license for every like VMware product included,
Oh wow.
and you have their whole suite, ESXi, vCenter, vSphere. You have VMware Workstation. You have the Mac version also included. So
Oh wow.
it's what I would, again, it's the resources to learn on the cheap are out there.
Yeah.
It's just about learning how to find them and how to take advantage of them. So that's something that I always try to tell people. I'm like, try to do your research. Honestly, I mean, everything going on with Reddit, we'll see if it'll still be the top IT forum.
Yep.
But post, don't feel ashamed to post in forums about like, hey guys, I'm trying to learn this. There are people out there who have the knowledge already who might be able to help you. Maybe like they can take what you already know and recommend to you, hey, you can skip these two things because you already have the basic knowledge of them. Like you don't really need to
Yep.
know more than that, and you can go to this thing. Or they might be, like I said, in this case, they might be able to point you out to like either free or low cost resources for you to learn these
Hmm.
technologies where if you try to go buy them directly from VMware, I think you're spending like $3,500 on just vSphere licensing, not even including vCenter.
Yeah, man. Well, that is a huge tip that will save people so much money if they want to go in that direction. And yeah, I definitely second. I probably visit the sysadmin um, subreddit fairly often, and I've asked a lot of questions that now in retrospect might have been dumb, and that's why you make sure to and you log in anonymously. Don't have it connect to your actual name. Um, so yeah, and also don't put out any sensitive company information on there too. I'll say that. uh, but yeah, definitely ask your questions on there. Someone, most likely your issue isn't that original. um, yeah, someone's gone through that same issue before.
Exactly. Yeah. And honestly, that's one of the top subreddits that I always go to because that's where I sometimes like learn about outages before like I actually learn about them at
Yeah.
work. So it's
Yep.
it's the community is very active, and it's again, but that's the IT community. It's part of the reason why I love this field to an extent. It's we love to share our knowledge.
Yeah.
I've always said that if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. You know,
Yes.
you don't like you don't want to be the smartest person because then to an extent you don't have somebody to also learn off of.
Yeah.
Now, there are circumstances like, once you make it to the sea level to an extent you're kind of at that stop level already. You're to an extent you should be the smartest
Yeah.
person in the room. But in that case, the way I would apply it is like don't think you know everything and don't think the way that the way that maybe when you learned
Mm,
it 10 years ago, it's still the correct way. And
yes.
it comes into it where it's like also you have to know that some of your knowledge might not even be, it might be outdated. And it's,
Yep.
that's when a little bit of humility comes into place, and talking. And I mean, I even go as far back as I will bounce things off of level one support. Like
Hmm.
if I run into just an issue that I can't think about it, sometime, and I've had this actually happen. A level one tech actually helped me solve an issue that
Yeah.
me as a level two tech at the time, and then I had a level three tech working with me. We were both working together trying to resolve this issue. And the tech happened to walk behind us. The issue was, for whatever reason, the user just could not connect to any file shares. They couldn't connect
Hmm.
to, they couldn't even log in or even try to go into the domain. And so I
Yeah.
was checking, I was checking everything. I checked, the NIC card. I checked that it was in the right IP. I would ping the IP.
Hmm.
But like if I try to do it by DNS name, it wouldn't do it. And
Mm.
so, it was me and the level three guy. We're just sitting there. We were like knocking our heads, and the level one guy walked behind us, and I was like, I just pulled him in. I was like, hey man, I was like, can you help? Can you mind taking a look at something and let me know? And I kind of explained the issues to him. And keep in mind, like at this point, we were on the desktop, and I was just looking at the control panel.
Yeah.
And he takes a look, and he's like, wait, that computer is connected to Wi-Fi. And
Mm.
so me and the level three guy, we just completely overlooked looking if it was on Wi-Fi because
Yeah.
it's a for us it's like no, we see that it's connected to hardwired.
Yeah.
And sure enough, we checked the Wi-Fi and they were connected to the guest network.
Yep. Yep.
And again, that's why I always say it's like don't you're not the smartest person for you're gonna overlook things, and it's having
Yes.
that to an extent humility to reach out and just yeah, it may be something that to you it's like, oh well, it may be too high for them, or it's too, they don't have this knowledge in this field or anything. And that might be the case, but they might have different experiences, or have been exposed to something that, or see something differently than you, the way that you see it,
Hmm.
which I say, in IT, sometimes you do need that. It's, I remember one of my works that I used to work at. They would talk about, it was a YouTube video that they would have all their new employees watch, and it was I
Yeah.
can't remember, it was like the 5 monkey um, experiment, or like experiment that was made, where they to do this experiment, they locked 5 monkeys, in a cage with a ladder, and they
Hmm.
hung bananas up on top, right?
Hmm.
So the monkeys had to climb up to grab a banana. Well, when the monkey would climb up and grab the banana, the people running the experiment would shoot them with water, all of them, with
Hmm.
a hose, and then they would take one out. They did that a couple of times with the original group, until it got to a point where the original group, if they saw any monkey trying to climb the ladder to grab the bananas, they would knock him off, like, no, we don't want to get soaked.
Hmm.
And then they replaced one monkey, put in a new monkey who had never been exposed to this. And of course, when he would see the bananas, he'd want him, he'd try to climb up, and the other monkeys would knock him down. And they kept doing this until the original 5 monkeys had been out. And there
Yeah.
was, 5 monkeys who were never exposed to being hosed with water. And they
Hmm.
still, if any one of them tried to climb the ladder, they would still knock down the monkey. Well, the thought
Hmm.
experiment, that and why that company would have all their new hires watch it was, look, we may have set things that we already do, or certain
Hmm.
processes already set in place, and to them it was like, but it may not be the best thing. Maybe you have, you coming in, of, or you can see how to do something a little bit more efficient or a little bit more
Hmm.
streamlined, and don't feel like, oh well, now I have to do it this way. We don't want to be that monkey that's like, well, I've always been, knocked down when I try to go for the banana, so I'm not even, going to do it. But it's like, no, ask, and then bring those things up.
Yeah.
And that's something that, within IT, like, I feel like that's something that we all we all want. And most, a lot of us do that. I would say a big majority of us do that. We come in and we question things, um, and it's to learn the why.
Yep.
On the flip side of it, we also sometimes need to realize that maybe a company does something one way,
Hmm.
because they've avoided issues, or they had issues going with another way, and also, being flexible and learning it their way. Again, we don't
Yes.
always know everything.
No, that's really good. Yeah, just because the company does it, one way, because there was a roadblock in the past, doesn't mean that the roadblock is still there to
Yep.
this day. Um, yeah, and just recognizing and having the discernment on, okay, it's worth finding another solution to this, or going this route. That's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that analogy. All right, we're going to wind down. I have a few rapid fire questions. Uh, the first one is, what do you do to relax?
As I know this is gonna sound weird as somebody who works in IT, but honestly, it sounds weird, but I really relax. I get really relaxed just writing code sometimes, or
Yeah.
scripting.
Okay.
It just kind of puts me in a zen.
Yeah.
But outside of that, if it's non IT related, go out with the dog to the dog park and just throw the ball with him.
Nice. I love it. And how old is your dog?
He is one. It's actually been a year since we rescued him, so he's
Okay.
1 year and 3 months.
Oh, awesome. I love that. All right. Are you more team iOS or Android?
Ooh, iOS because of privacy. I'm sorry, Android.
Good point. Good point. Uh, if you have to choose just one OS, would it be Mac, Linux, or Windows?
That's previously I would have probably said Mac, only
Uh-huh.
because sometimes trying to manage Linux servers with Windows was a little hectic. But now
Hmm.
that Windows has built-in WSL or Windows subsystem for Linux,
Yeah.
I would have to go with Windows. I would love to have Linux always, but there's just
Yeah.
a lot of stuff that doesn't work.
Yeah. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Coffee. Nice. All right. Most people are coffee. All right. Are you a night owl or a morning bird?
Ooh, I'm a night owl. Yeah.
Yep. Me too. All right. I think that brings us to the end. Jose, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
No worries, Brent. Thank you for having me. And it was a blast. And I hope that so just a quick message to the people listening, guys. Uh, don't be afraid to get started learning. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, and start reaching out. And if you don't know what to learn, I mean, Brent right now, this podcast is going to start slowly showing you where that's at. But they are, like I said, go up on Reddit. Don't be afraid to ask them questions. And most of the community is there to help. We welcome people who want to be in this community, because the more of us who are trained in it, the better things will run. And we might be able to get to a point where we can automate a lot of things, where the whole world, we might be able to have you know more time off.
Yep. Sounds good to me. All right. Thanks, Jose. Take care.
All right.